Please stop. Please.
Welcome back everyone to another fun-filled video featuring trivia from the original Halloween 1978. This is hands down my favorite slasher film and horror villain of all time. Now sit back as I rifle off the most interesting trivia facts, and as always, if you learned something new today, please consider liking the video and subscribing to support my small channel. John Carpenter considered the hiring of Jamie Lee Curtis as the ultimate tribute to Alfred Hitchcock, who had given her mother, Janet Leigh, legendary status in Psycho 1960. During the same period, Universal Studio producers were trying to enroll Jamie Lee in the new production of Psycho 2. From a budget of $300,000, the film went to gross $47 million at the box office, making Halloween one of the most successful independent films of all time. The original script, titled The Babysitter Murders, had the events take place over several days. It was a budgetary decision to change the script to have everything happen on the same day, doing this to reduce the number of costume changes and locations required, and it was decided that Halloween, the scariest night of the year, was the perfect night for this to happen. John Carpenter's intent with the character of Michael Myers was that the audience should never be able to relate to him. It was revealed that the crew had chosen two masks for Michael Myers to decide on. The first was a Don Post, Emmett Kelly smiling clown mask. This was a homage to how he killed his sister Judith in the clown costume. The other mask was a 1975 Captain James T. Kirk mask that was purchased for around $1. It had the eyebrows and sideburns ripped off, the face was painted fish belly white, and the hair was spray painted brown, and the eyes were opened up more. They tested out the Kirk mask, and the crew decided that it was much more creepy because it was so emotionless. This became the Michael Myers mask. Of the female leads, all the girls are supposed to be in high school, and only Jamie Lee Curtis was actually a teenager at the time of shooting. Donald Pleasance was paid $20,000 for 5 days of work. John Carpenter approached Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play the role of Dr. Sam Loomis, that was eventually played by Donald Pleasance, but both had turned him down due to the low pay. Christopher Lee later said it was the biggest mistake he had ever made in his career. The story is based on an experience John Carpenter had in college touring a psychiatric hospital. Carpenter met a child who stared at him with an evil look, and it totally terrified him. As the film was shot out of sequence, John Carpenter created a fear meter so that Jamie Lee Curtis would know what level of terror she should be exhibiting. Halloween was shot in 20 days in the spring of 1978. Made on a budget of $300,000, it became the highest grossing independent movie ever made at that time. The dark lighting in the movie comes from necessity, as the crew didn't have enough money for actual lighting. A young Jamie Lee Curtis was so disappointed with her performance that she became convinced she would be fired after only the first day of filming. When her phone rang that night and it was John Carpenter on the phone, Curtis was certain it was the end of her movie career. Instead, Carpenter called to congratulate her and tell her he was very happy with the way things had gone. John Carpenter wrote the role of Linda for P.J. Soles after seeing her performance in Brian De Palma's Carrie 1976. Although John Carpenter had originally hoped to get either Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee to play Dr. Sam Loomis, he was thrilled when Donald Pleasance accepted, of whom he was a huge fan. Pleasance was easily the oldest and most experienced person on the production. Pleasance actually started by saying, "I don't know why I'm in this movie, and I don't know who my character is. The only reason I'm doing this movie is because I have alimony to pay, and my daughter in England said the music that you did for Assault in Precinct 13, 1976 is cool." The opening POV sequence took 2 days to film. Deborah Hill wrote most of the dialogue for the female characters, while John Carpenter concentrated on Dr. Loomis's speeches. All of the actors wore their own clothes, since there was no money for a costume department. Jamie Lee Curtis went to JCPenney for Laurie Strode's wardrobe. She spent less than $100 for the entire set. As the movie was actually shot in early spring in Southern California, as opposed to Illinois in late October, the crew had to buy paper leaves from a decorator and paint them in the desired autumn colors, then scatter them in the filming locations. To save money, after a scene was filmed, the leaves were collected and reused. John Carpenter composed the score in 4 days. P.J. Soles went to a screening of the movie after it was released, sitting in the 4th row of a regular audience. She was very amused when during her nude scene and the line, "See anything you like?" a male audience member in front shouted, "Hell yes I do," unaware she was right behind him. Dennis Quaid, who Soles was dating at the time, asked if she wanted him to confront the man, but she declined, too amused from the experience. Quaid was originally supposed to play Linda's boyfriend, Bob Sims, but scheduling conflicts prevented this. This was Jamie Lee Curtis's first feature film. She was paid a reported $8,000 for her efforts. In an interview, Mustafa Akkad said that John Carpenter had envisioned making the movie for around $300,000. Coincidentally, Akkad said he was producing and filming a major motion picture at the same time starring Laurence Olivier, which was costing his company roughly around $300,000 a day. When Carpenter told him the fixed price of his movie, he immediately funded it. Jamie Lee Curtis admits she made up the "Just the Two of Us" song that she sang to herself at the movie's beginning when she was walking home from school. The Myers house was a local find in South Pasadena in which the house was large and decrepit, abandoned, and seen in the majority of the film. However, as the house had to look ordinary and furnished for the earlier scenes with the young Michael Myers, almost the whole cast and crew worked together to clean the place, move in furniture, put up wallpaper, and set up running water and electricity, and as well take it all out when they were finished. The scene where the shape seems to appear out of the darkness behind Laurie was accomplished by using a simple dimmer switch on a light that slowly illuminated the mask. John Carpenter told production designer Tommy Lee Wallace to go out and find a government-looking car to be used by Dr. Loomis and Marion in the opening scenes. Wallace went to the nearest car rental agency, and a 1976 Ford LTD station wagon was the only car there that looked the part. Wallace hired it for 2 weeks, installing a wire mesh divider between the front and rear seats and slapping Illinois State decals on the front doors. Carpenter loved it, and the car rental agency had no idea of the LTD's use in the film. It was revealed that 5 different people dressed as the Shape, including Nick Castle throughout most of the movie, Tony Moran during the unmasking by Laurie Strode, stuntman James Winburn, production designer Tommy Lee Wallace, due to his knowledge of how much force would be needed to break props during the action shots in a single take, and co-writer and co-producer Deborah Hill. In the external shot, when Tommy sees the Shape for the first time, Deborah explained that she happened to bring the costume with her that day and no one else was available for the shot. John Carpenter's direction for Nick Castle in his role as Myers was minimal. When Castle asked what Myers' motivation was for a particular scene, Carpenter replied that his motivation was to walk from one set marker to another. Carpenter also instructed Castle to tilt his head a couple of times as he was observing the corpses. Originally, Dr. Loomis was supposed to have a phone conversation with his wife. Donald Pleasance didn't do it, saying he thought the character shouldn't have a family or a past. To ensure Michael Myers would break the window of the station wagon as Dr. Loomis approaches the insane asylum, a wrench was adhered to the forearm and hand. It was then painted flesh-colored to hide from the camera. Actress and Playboy model Sandy Johnson, who played Judith Myers, said the only thing she didn't like about making the movie is that the fake blood would stain her skin. Since she was topless during the scene where Michael kills her, the blood was applied all over her bare chest and stomach, and all of it had to be scrubbed off in between takes. She remembered that whoever was doing it was rough, so Jamie Lee Curtis offered to do it, and she was much gentler. Roger Ebert mentioned how the first Halloween movie was extremely scary, and then recounted how when Gene saw it at the local movie theater, he was so scared that he took a cab home, even though he only lived 2 blocks from the movie theater. Gene then recounted how when he got home, he went to the shower and pulled back the curtain to make sure nobody was there. To achieve the shot of Michael Myers strangling the dog, the trainer on set held the dog in his arms and dropped him naturally. This was shot in slow motion to make it look as if the dog had been killed. Director and writer John Carpenter was only paid $10,000 to write, direct, and score the film. Deborah Hill worked for no salary, but a percentage of the profits. As the film grossed in excess of $70 million, this proved to be lucrative for Deborah. The first showing of the film during its theatrical run was on October 25, 1978, in Kansas City, Missouri. The voice of Judith Myers' boyfriend, David Kyle, was dubbed by Tommy Lee Wallace, the production manager. William Shatner did not find out until years later that a mask bearing his likeness was used to make Michael Myers' mask. He sued for past royalties, and they settled out of court. Shatner ended up donating the settlement money to charity. At the 3-minute and 54-second mark into the film, the lights go off upstairs where Michael's sister and her boyfriend are. The boyfriend is heard saying goodnight to her from the stairs at the 5-minute mark, leaving only 1 minute and 6 seconds for them to have slept together. The voice of Annie's boyfriend, Paul, whom we hear on the phone talking to Lindsay and a minute later to Annie, was actually John Carpenter. For years after Halloween was released, people would tell writer-director John Carpenter how horrified they were by Michael Myers' grotesquely disfigured face when Laurie pulls the mask off for a moment towards the end of the film. But actually all they saw was the ordinary face of the actor Tony Moran playing the role, perfectly normal except for a small knife wound inflicted by Laurie during their struggle in the closet, which was created by using special effects makeup. Carpenter cites this as evidence of the power of suggestion in cinema, that the audience saw a monster on screen, so assumed that he must look like a monster underneath the mask. Originally, the script had Dr. Loomis having a surprised reaction to the disappearance of Michael Myers' body from the lawn at the film's ending. Donald Pleasence suggested his character's reaction should instead be an "I knew this would happen" look on his face. They shot it both ways and ended up using Donald Pleasence's idea. Because PJ Soles' shirt was open for the scene where she is strangled with the telephone cord, an alternate version was shot for the trailer and publicity shots where she is wearing a bathrobe. Total body count for the movie is 7, including Judith Myers, the unnamed truck driver, 2 dogs, Linda, Bob Sims, and Annie Brackett. Well, that about wraps it up for another amazing film. Make sure to check out my other trivia videos listed in the comments. And until then, stay cool and keep watching that cinema.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.